Well, hi again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Adam's Music Box. And today I want to talk about what we can learn about music from animals, because they can actually teach us quite a lot. And whether we're talking about biology, whether we're talking about culture, whether we're talking about aptitude, there's always these questions that come up, and they've come up since the beginning of time when people started thinking about these things. And this is the dynamic of nature versus nurture. In other words, are our habits, our abilities, our likes, dislikes, hopes, fears, all of these things and more, are they related to the stimuli that we encounter, the things that we learn, or are they something that is congenital? Is it something that's genetic? Is it something we are born with? Is it something that's God-given? And the question for music has always pondered, it's been a ponderous issue rather for many people over the years. And there's not one answer, but there is a primary answer. There's an answer that is satisfactory in the whole, even though some specifics will need to be filled in as we go along. And this is that certain musical tones, certain musical patterns, certain musical rhythms, and the combination thereof have certain objective emotional resonances with people. They elicit specific emotional responses when we hear them. We know when a piece of music is intended to make us happy or sad, or whether it makes us dance, or makes us contemplative, or makes us pray, or makes us relax, or make us confused. There are certain, again, sounds, rhythms, timbres, textures, and again, all of these things in various combinations that specifically elicit these responses in the listener. It's nothing that we need to learn, and I don't even think it's anything that we can learn. It's truly innate. And that's what makes all of the great composers and songwriters and musical performers unique, because they have the ability to hone in on certain combinations of sound that say something to people, just like a good rhetorician can construct sounds which make up words, which then make up sentences and create meaning for people. And the difference is, while language tends to be it's a cultural phenomenon because every different culture has a different language. When people say that music is the universal language, what they really mean is that sound is a universal language, and musicians are able to arrange certain sounds, including rhythm and including chordality and including harmony and including all of these things that collectively make music. And they can do so in a way that communicates with us, that gives us a message, that tells us a story, that communicates some form of information. Music is, after all, information, and information as a word, we might associate it with data or things that are somewhat cut and dry, things that are in the business world or the mathematical or scientific world. But everything is information, including emotions. And that's primarily what music is concerned with. And how does this relate to animals? Well, it's from animals that we can understand just how true this is. No animal ever picked up a musical instrument and played it in the way that a human would. Of course, a cat can run across a piano, a dog can sit on a drum, but that's not really what we mean when we say playing music. Of course, it produces sound. But what I do mean is that when a dog is vocalizing, when it's barking in anger, threatening someone, we can tell. When a dog is whimpering out of fear, we can tell. When a cat is purring with joy, we can tell. When a cat is meowing for food or cuddles, we can tell. When a cat is crying out in bewilderment or pain, we can also tell. Likewise, when we make sounds to animals, they can tell. If we are gruff and angry with an animal, they can tell that we're angry and they'll react accordingly. If we're offering them affection and love, they also know that and respond accordingly, assuming that they are in a mentally normal state, which obviously most cats and dogs are. Same with the way that humans have reacted to sounds in the wild. Birds make certain sounds that have amused the human race for millennia. a tiger vocalizing the fact that it is marking its territory, and that if you come closer, he might do something not vocal anymore, but physical. The sound is information. It's giving you a warning: get out of my way or you'll be eaten. And so it is true with us humans that make music. There are certain chords and sounds that have certain meaning. And what separates the good musicians from the great musicians is that the great ones know how to construct these sounds and how to order these sounds in such a way so as to impart to the audience the emotion that they intend to convey. That's truly what makes a great musician. And we can see it. What makes the end of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony about joy and triumph and so stirring? It's the sounds. Forget that it has a lyrical content, just focus on the music. What makes something like I talked about last week, Death and Transfiguration by Strauss, funereal? What is it about Tchaikovsky's Fourth that makes us think of fate and makes us think of the pains and sinews and all of this of living? It's the sound. Sounds have certain emotions, and you can test this out yourself. Play a piece of music by to someone who's never heard it. Let's say someone's never heard Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony. Play him or her the piece. Ask them what they think. What is their emotional response? Tell them, if beg them if you need to describe what sorts of emotions it conveys to them. And if you can, do it to people around the world that don't necessarily speak your language. Go to Google Translate and go to someone in Japan and say, right, what does this piece of music sung in an unfamiliar language say to you? Go to someone in Russia, go to someone in Latin America, assuming you don't speak Spanish. The world is your oyster because of the internet for these sorts of things. Or you can do it in your personal life if you live around the United Nations building in New York, let's say, or somewhere like that. There is objectivity in music. Now, the music that we like the most and that we rank here, my top 10, that is, of course, subjective. But the overall emotional essence and meaning of certain sounds is, in fact, objective. Now, I should also caution you that it's not just the sounds alone. It's not just a single chord or a single rhythm that has an objective linkage to an emotion that can't be altered. It's really everything together. So, for instance, when you put a minor chord in a string section and let it sustain, that can be very profoundly moving in the direction of sadness. But those same minor chords, if married to a very upbeat, danceable rhythm, as minor chords often are in Arab music, then you can say that the emotion they're conveying is happy. You need to look at the finished product. You can't simply dissect the sounds. And again, that's why the great composers and songwriters are able to do this. They're able to say, right, I'll take a bit of this chord, which on its own might be sad, a bit of this rhythm, which on its own might be a bit comedic, and I'll put it together and I'll make something celebratory and happy. And that's what great musicians around the world have always done. So it is a universal language, but in a much more objective and in a much more natural, even let's say biological sense. And it's a biology that is so consistent that it transcends species. As I said, dogs, cats, tigers, well, tigers are kind of cat for those of you in the comments, but any of that, it's all very transcendent. And so finally, we move on to the question of music that is atonal or semitonal. What about that? Well, a lot of it, if taken at face value, communicates one of my very favorite emotions, and that's the emotion of comedy. It's music that makes us laugh. And one of the reasons that I think a lot of this music is held in such disdain by audiences, for good reason, is because a lot of the people who write it, and more importantly, the people who critique it and praise it, are the people doing so saying, oh, we've got to take this so seriously. We've got to sit down in perfect silence and scratch our chin while this strange, dissonant, atonal mess of sounds is hitting us from the stage, where the absolutely proper human response to that would be to laugh. And there's nothing wrong with laughter. A lot of people teach you that there is. These people are misleading you. Laughter is one of the best emotions of all, and it's one that you can't really get enough of. Obviously, there are moments when you shouldn't laugh, and composers know that, which is why most of the great pieces that deal with life and death are not atonal. They're very, very tonal and have very rich harmonies. But of course, there is this place for comedy. And that's another reason why I really love Frank Zappa, because he stripped off this veneer of seriousness in terms of music that was very polyphonous, semitonal, atonal, completely dissonant. He allowed this music to be played to audiences and encouraged them to react accordingly, which in many cases is laughter, sometimes or followed by laughter. And that's not to take away from the fact that the music is incredibly complex and incredibly interesting, because in Zappa's case, at least, his instrumental music in this broad style was absolutely complex and interesting and funny. Funny is good. And lyrics can sometimes be the nudge. So, assuming you understand the language, and I said that you don't have to, but when you do, and the music is something very unfamiliar, it can help nudge you. And that's why Zappa's rock records are very much known for having this very complex and intricate music that really pioneered several genres, whether it be modern chamber music, modern orchestral music in some cases, modern and avant-garde jazz. And the complexity of the music and the harsh tonalities in some cases that he employs are always married to very witty, satirical, humorous lyrics. His instrumental music is the same. Just because the words aren't there to guide you doesn't mean that you should deny the emotional guidance that you're clearly being given. And so there's nothing wrong with laughing at atonal music. A lot of it is very funny. And when you can appreciate it from that point of view, you understand why it's the marketing people, it's the critics, and it's the people composing it for the wrong reasons, which frankly, at least since the mid 20th century, have been most of them, secret between you and me. They're sort of leading you wrong. Humor is great. And that kind of music is the best way in the instrumental form to communicate humor. And so listen to your cats, listen to your dogs. They're telling you something. You already know what they're telling you. And the same thing is true of musicians, and the great ones are able to communicate it effectively, just as a loving pet is able to do so with you. Right then, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.